is to lift the start. Okay, we're all set up. So welcome everybody, good evening. It's amazing to see so many people have joined tonight. Clearly there's a desire to be traveling, so this is probably the closest we can get to traveling, to speak to somebody who does a lot of traveling, or did a lot of traveling at least. So good evening once again, and I hope you all had a wonderful Sukkot. I know it was a very strange Sukkot for so many of us, a strange Simchat Torah. But we got through it. We got through the Chagim, and please God, onwards and upwards. Next one is Chanukah. Hopefully by Chanukah we'll be allowed to meet in somewhat bigger groups. But anyway, as we've all learned over the last number of months, no plans can be made till we know. Also, as someone once told me, the plan is not a plan till you hear it from Dan. So we'll wait to see what Dan the man says on Sunday. But anyway, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Captain Aaron Phillips. And Aaron, thank you so much for joining us tonight and giving us of your time. And I know it's been a crazy number of months, not just for pilots, but for everyone in this world. But certainly for as we all know, the travel industry has been heavily hit, with borders being closed, with interstate travel, international travel. I always say that I was supposed to be in Israel twice this year, but clearly I wasn't supposed to be in Israel. But I had planned to go for 2 different missions. Sadly, that didn't eventuate, but please God, soon. So Aaron is joining us tonight. As I said, he's given us of his time, and I know a lot of people are. We've had over the last number of months various guests. We've had paramedics and police officers, and I think a lot of people don't always get to hear the inside workings of various professions. And my friend Mike Gerson, who put me onto you through, I think, a mutual friend, he was right. I think a lot of people are curious about the life of a pilot, and you often see pilots, obviously, when you travel and you see them in the airport waiting, perhaps you might get a glance at them in the front of the plane for a second. But other than that, we don't really know the stories or their lives or what it entails. And so thank you for joining us tonight. And the way we're going to structure tonight is going to be a sort of a dialogue Q&A between myself and Aaron. And of course, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat box. Aaron didn't say there's no questions off limits, but I think he's happy to answer any questions. Aaron, also mazel tov to you. You're a recent father, for your second child or first child?
Second one now, yes.
So you look pretty fresh though, mate. What's going on?
I don't think so.
You don't feel fresh?
Not at all.
So let's start. Let's just get a little bit to know you a little bit. Tell us how you sort of got into becoming a pilot, a professional pilot. What sort of led you down that road, and what did it entail becoming a pilot?
Well, both my grandfather and father are both pilots, so I really had no choice but to go into the family business. Yeah. So at an early age, I would go away with my father. In fact, one specific time, my dad was on reserve. So as a pilot, there's periods where they put you on reserve, and you have a certain amount of time to get to the airport. And to cover sickness or some schedule problem. And my dad was on reserve, and it's back then it was my mum was at work, and plan was always like I'd just go to my grandparents if something happened, and it just so happened that he couldn't get me to my grandparents because can't remember why. So he actually took me to work with him, and back then he just put me in the jump seat, which is the little spare seat in the flight deck. And I went away on a trip with him. And I remember, I think I was like 4 or 5. And I remember it was like -9 where we landed. And I didn't even know that it could be that cold. I didn't know that minus figures existed. So at a very early age, I got to go away with my father. And then growing up, he worked originally for Ansett. I don't know if some people may recall that airline. But in 1989, or not 1990, he started with Qantas. So then, growing up, I would go on trips with him, to Bangkok or Singapore, all over the place. So was pretty exciting, you know, being a young kid and having an interest in aviation and getting to sit in the actual flight deck. So that for me was how I got the bug, you know, and then really at 16 is when you can go solo, is when you get you start your private pilot's license. So I used to just do that while I was at school on the weekends or on holidays, and just that's how I got interested in it.
So you fell in love with sitting in front of the plane.
Yeah, well, it wasn't always a love story, to be honest. I probably was a bit embarrassed at the time, but I actually got airsick. And they're so small, these little airplanes, and they, you know, you feel every single bit of turbulence or the wind moving, and you know, when it's hot, it's actually like quite horrible to be in. You're in this tiny little airplane, your shoulders are touching someone else, and it's hot and it smells of like fuel and previous student spew. So you have to really like it, you know, and you just persevere, and then you keep your eyes on the, you know, the goal, the prize.
And so you basically you finish school, and then so you do a lot of flying in smaller planes when you're 16.
Yes.
And then is there official course that you have to go on, or university?
Okay, so you start off doing they call it GFPT, General Flying Progress Test, which is a qualification where you can fly. It's basically a restricted private pilot's license. So you can fly in only a set area. So Sydney has got a training area, and that's just west of Sydney over Bankstown and before east of Katoomba and down to Camden. There's like this shape, and that's the area where you're allowed to operate in. And that's, you can fly there in a GFPT, and then you get the next step is a private pilot license, and you can fly anywhere in Australia and some countries in the world with a private pilot license.
Yeah.
And then after you've got your private pilot's license, you go to do your if you want to do this, it's a commercial pilot's license, and that allows you to fly aircraft up to 5.7 tons. So basically, I think it's like a 10 or 11 seater aircraft. That's what you can fly on your commercial pilot's license. And then for anything over 5.7 tons, you need an airline transport pilot license. So what I did is while I was at school, I was doing my GFPT.
Yep.
And then when I finished school, I got into university, and back then you could do was a Bachelor of Aviation Management, and you could either do it while you fly or you could defer it. So I actually got in, deferred it, and my dad, you know, that was very helpful having my father in the industry, because you have firsthand knowledge of what employers want. And basically the most important thing is to have the hours. So you need a certain number of hours flying to get the jobs you need. So I straight away started flying, doing my commercial pilot's license.
Yep.
And then in fact I just got my commercial pilot's license, and September 11th happened.
Oh, wow.
You know what happened actually? I got my commercial pilot's license. I was doing my exams for my airline transport pilot license, and it was suggested that this is what I did. You know, not everyone has to do this, but it was suggested to try out for the Defence Force, and that was purely just practice doing interviews. I liked it. My dad was in the Air Force. My grandfather was in the Air Force, maybe in the Army back then, but I really had no real like burning desire to do it. But I thought, you know, I'll give it a go. And I ended up trying out for the Army and the Air Force, and I actually got in. And it's actually quite there aren't that many people that get into it. And so I got in, and then I just went with the flow. I went to the Army, so I became an Army pilot. And when I was on my Army pilot's course, there was a time where you'd go and fly fixed wing airplanes or rotary wing, and mostly the Army was rotary wing. And I always wanted to be an airline pilot, so I was always looking to try and fly the fixed wing. And they called it, in fact, the Qantas conversion course, because you would basically get trained up, and then Qantas would just take you. So that was my goal, and they in fact stopped that while I was on pilot's course. So I had to go into helicopters. I know, as I already had a as I already had a commercial pilot's license, I was like, well, I probably should just go back to the industry and fly. They call it in general aviation.
Yep.
So I ended up going through general aviation to get into an airlines. But in answer to your question, how do you get into it? There's 3 ways basically. You can go and do it through university, like I was doing it.
Yep.
You can go through the Defence Force, like in fact I ended up doing it as well. And there's also a cadetship that most airlines offer, which is also really good. So there are 3 ways. Yeah.
So they sort of get you to go through the training, and then you sort of commit to flying with them for X amount.
Well, we up until recently, we still have a cadetship, but I'm not sure what's happening with my particular employer. But every other airline has cadetships, and they basically take you from having no experience to being a fully qualified pilot with that airline. Yeah. So if I had that opportunity, I would have taken it, because it is a great way to get into the industry quickly. Yeah. But there's nothing wrong with going through the normal process.
It's broken up, Aaron.
Oh, is really?
If it's me or you?
It's probably me. I've got ADSL here. I'm still waiting on NBN.
There you go. Okay, so a lot of questions are coming into me privately. It's amazing already, so many questions. But I'm going to sort of just go through some of the things that I thought we'd get to. So you start working for an airline, and in terms of finding work, I mean, obviously we'll talk about COVID shortly, but yeah. Before COVID times, getting to work for an airline, how competitive is that? What are the skill set? Like, I mean, how would someone know if they feel like they can be a good pilot? You have to have, be able to be in tight spaces. What sort of?
It's very funny you say that, because it's you sort of enroll to become an airline pilot with most courses, or commercial pilot at least, without ever really seeing someone do it. Like, I was fortunate enough to be in the flight deck with my dad, but at least now there's a lot, you see a lot of stuff on the internet or YouTube or Instagram of what actually happens. But that is still like, you're only seeing like a small amount of what really happens. And sometimes people contact me and ask me some questions, and friends of friends. But it is funny that there's not many professions out there where you would actually have absolutely no idea about ever doing it, because we're not allowed to take people in the flight deck anymore. The door's shut. It's like after September 11. So, so I can't remember what the question was now.
Yes, you can't really get a taste of it until you're
actually doing it. Exactly right. Like, when I was learning to fly, I was getting airsick, and I'm thinking, oh, is this something that I really want to do? But it's pretty normal. It's, to get airsick at least. So I would, if anyone's watching and they do get airsick and they get discouraged, I wouldn't. It's something that you just, like, I go on a boat now, and I in the harbour in Sydney, and it's terrible. I hate it. I get seasick. My wife and I, we've been on honeymoon in Capri on a boat, and we just wanted to get off it. It's people get motion sickness. This happens.
Yeah. So you're saying you definitely, if you do get it, you can certainly overcome it, and you can get used to it.
You'll just get used to it. Yeah.
So first jobs when you start working for a commercial airline, when I think of commercial airline, I'm thinking of Qantas and Virgin and flying from here to America or something like that. At what point can you start doing something like that
Okay, so how it happens in Australia is not indicative of how it works around the world.
Yeah.
What we do, it is very competitive, like you said, extremely competitive, and at one point a lot of people would go through then wouldn't end up working in an airline. But I think nowadays there's starting to be a bit of a shortage of pilots, so people will find their way into some employment in the industry. But so basically in Australia, you get your commercial pilot's license, and that doesn't really qualify you to do much. It's a license, but you need to do these things called ratings on top of that, and they allow you to fly at night, or they allow you to fly through clouds, or they allow you to fly above 10,000 feet. That's where we need to fly pressurized aircraft in Australia. There's all these sorts of low flying qualifications.
Right. So you got a bit of hurdles to get to an actual.
So you have to go. You get your instructor. Sorry, or you have an instructor rating. So a lot of people find a particular avenue they're going to go through. So in Australia, it's pretty common for pilots to go up to the Northern Territory and live in a remote community and fly passengers around, fly tourists around the bungalows, fly freight. Like freight is actually quite a desirable job. It's not generally someone's first job. Someone's first job might be something like instructing, and they build their hours, and then they slowly work their way up to more sophisticated aircraft. And then when they've got a lot of hours, they might go into twin engine airplanes, and then the regional airlines might become interested. And then once you've got some experience flying a regional airline, then you might go to a major airline like a Virgin or Qantas. But it is a slow process. You need to build these hours.
Yeah, and
experience. Yeah. So a lot of people would say to me when I was flying, it's like a small aircraft. Oh, do you want to be a commercial pilot? And it was like, well, I am. Like, and those flights to America. Do you want to? Always the question. Even now, I get, oh, do you want to? Because I fly the 737, which is what you fly domestically around Australia.
Yeah.
Oh, are you going to do international one day? It's funny, like everyone seems to think, yeah, that's what the goal is.
Yeah. So what was your first like big flight that you were in charge kind of thing? Do you remember
Okay,
that?
so yeah, 10 years ago, I became a captain on a Embraer 190. So I'm not sure if many people are familiar with that. It's basically, Virgin no longer operates them anymore, but they were basically two aisle two, and it's a jet, seats 110 passengers. So my first flight I did as a captain, I can't remember where it was. It's probably between Sydney and Canberra. Yeah. We did a lot of those, but basically it's exactly what I do now, just around Australia. I'm on the 737 now, though.
Yeah. And 737s carry how many people usually?
We have them set up with 176 passengers.
Wow. Okay.
Oh, already asking me the tough questions. Lucky I knew that one.
I'm going to go to one question that somebody's asked me, and I know we're sort of jumping the gun a little, but I think it's somebody, obviously a lot of people fly, and turbulence is obviously a big fear of so many people. So someone's asking, please ask Aaron, how safe is it, or how worried should people be when there's turbulence? And you always hear people say, it's okay, relax. When do you start freaking out as a captain?
Turbulence it's funny. It's funny because for a number of reasons. Turbulence is like the biggest non-event. Like there's different types of turbulence. You can have turbulence near the ground that's called mechanical turbulence, which is a wind blowing over some buildings, and it creates updrafts or downdrafts or just the wind changing. And then we can have clear air turbulence, which you normally get between certain layers of the atmosphere. Yeah. But it's not the end of the world. It's just part of the job, Is it going to make the airplane crash? No, but there is some turbulence. I hate to say this, but there is some turbulence which is probably more alarming. So it's our company policy. We fly certain distances away from thunderstorms, and they might look very close to the aircraft, but they're generally at least 20 miles away from a thunderstorm. So if you're flying near a thunderstorm during takeoff and landing, that's probably something that I'd be a little bit more cautious about. But we're generally well separated from a particular storm. And even if it does look like we are close to it, there's certain particular ways that you can approach a storm for takeoff and landing. So it's not something that you would want to, as a passenger, as a pilot, you'd be concerned about, but as a passenger, it might look worse than what it is. Yeah. But even like temperature changes, like you could be flying in completely smooth air and the temperature changes, and that can cause a little bit of turbulence. But no, the aircraft's not going to fall apart. The airplanes are rated for extremely high stresses, and the turbulence is it's
part of flying. It's going to happen, and
yeah, I think the worst turbulence I've actually had is I was doing Darwin, Sydney, and in the afternoon, and so we're flying towards Sydney, and that's the time when all the heavy departures depart Sydney on their way through, like they fly via Darwin into Asia, and there's basically an aircraft every couple of minutes in the opposite direction. So we're separated by 1,000 feet, which is about basically 300 meters. And they're just like one after another, just going, and we're separated. We just see them, and it's like, it's good to watch. And one day we had, someone a flight attendant in the flight deck. We're all having a chat, watching what's happening. And it's like, oh yeah, look, there goes a 380. and you could see how it was separated. Like we're flying directly over each other, but they're facing a certain way because of the wind. And we're just sitting there, and then like all of a sudden, bang, we got wake turbulence, and the aircraft like rolled about like 40 degrees to wing down one way and disconnected the autopilot, and all sorts of alarms went off in there. And everyone's probably like freaking out. No, and it actually did like startle us, because it wasn't something that we were expecting. I think even that particular day that they were separated by 2,000 feet, and they've subsequently, I believe, changed separation standards with those aircraft because they're just so big, and the air that displaces is yeah. But anyway, turbulence, yeah, it's fine. Don't worry about it.
Okay, good. So talking about what just happened, with I remember seeing, I can't remember which movie it was, or where you see the, how many planes there are in the air at any given time. I mean, obviously it's been much less now, but like, I mean, how reliant are you on those towers and telling you where to fly, that there aren't sort of collisions and all that?
Well, the aircraft has a very, very accurate navigation system. It has, and all levels of redundancy built into it. So we can fly point to point, or we fly via airways, and we always know exactly where we are. And even in some places, if we're flying to Asia, because it's so accurate, we might actually plan an offset so that we're actually not on the actual flight path. We're just offset by a mile or two. Yeah. But they separate us. It's very basic. Like west is even, east is odd. So when you're flying west, they separate, you fly at even flight levels. So 36, 38, 40, and east is odd. So you fly 39, 41, or 37. So people are not heading in the same direction on the same airway. But then even in the aircraft itself, it's got this thing called a system that we have called TCAS.
Just cut off there. Yeah, sorry, I cut it there for a sec.
Oh, sorry. What was the last thing you heard?
That you were talking about the degrees, and then even with.
Oh yeah, so we have separate, like just basic. We call it hemispherical. You have separation due to the direction that you're flying in, and then even if you are flying in, even if for some reason it happens now and again, air traffic control makes a mistake and clears someone at the wrong level, and you're both flying at the same level and the exact same flight path, the aircraft will warn you. It's got this thing called TCAS, traffic collision avoidance system, and it will alert you to the other aircraft, and then it will actually tell you a way to avoid it. So they both talk to each other. We'll tell one aircraft to go up and one aircraft to go down.
So it's all. I mean, it's all literally computer based, and everything's digitalized, going and everything.
Well, the separation is so tight that above a certain altitude, or we call it a flight level, you actually have to have the autopilot in. So because it's so accurate, they want the aircraft to be flying as accurately as possible, because they got traffic moving around, and yeah,
it's incredible.
It's also actually, as you go higher, it's actually harder to control the airplane because the air is so thin as well. So I guess it's two reasons, but yeah, predominantly because they're packing every aircraft in.
Amazing. So that was a question that somebody posted. I think you've alluded to it now, just very quickly. In terms of autopilot and things like that, how like, can you have a few hours sleep if you were doing an international flight? Let's say, could you just go to sleep for 6-7 hours and wake up and all good, or you have to be awake all the time?
No, we actually can have two pilots in the flight deck, and a captain and a first officer. And so, for instance, even like a Perth-Sydney flight, a red eye, we call it, one that departs Perth at, I don't know, I think they departed at 1 o'clock in the morning or 11 o'clock Perth time. They arrive at 6 a.m. in Sydney. So it's, so even if it's 11 o'clock, a departure out of Perth, it's generally 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning for me, because I'm Sydney based. So my body thinks so I'm starting work at 2 o'clock in the morning and I land at 6. So we have this procedure. It's called, all airlines have it. It's called controlled rest. So that the idea is you only have a very short sleep, up to 30 minutes, and it's deliberately avoiding going into like a REM cycle. So So when you wake up, you don't have any sleep inertia.
It's like almost like a power nap at every.
Yeah, it's all right. You have a power nap. Like there's people do it different ways. Some people will even have a coffee and go to sleep. So as soon as they wake up, they've got the caffeine kicking in as well. Everyone's different. I can sleep standing up. So but some people don't do it. But yeah, it's really important because there's not really much happening in the cruise, and you really if it's a challenging approach to the other end, there's all sorts of things that could require a lot of concentration. You really want to be wide awake for the important part.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah.
And the landing how manual is the landing?
It can be as manual as you want it to be, where you can turn absolutely everything off, or you can have it completely, the autopilot can land the whole thing. It's
Really?
yeah, so it's not something you wouldn't normally have the autopilot land the aircraft, but every once in a while you should do it as a pilot, because we have this system called auto land, and when the weather is really, really bad, it's actually better to have the autopilot land, because you're coming in at close to 300 kilometers an hour, and we can land with only 60 meters visibility. So your eye can't pick up and adjust for that rate of closure that close to the ground. So you'd set up the autopilot, the auto throttle, everything would be engaged, auto brakes even, so the aircraft stopping at a known deceleration rate. And I mean, the weather's pretty bad. Like Melbourne gets fog around spring, around spring and autumn. So it's pretty common at that point to, if there is fog, you'd be doing auto land. And that's something that
you can't see at all. You can't see
yeah,
at
you
all.
can't. Yeah, you can't see. It's not. I can't remember what I was going to say, but yeah, it's pretty common to auto land. Then, in fact, if you hear that there's fog forecast on the PA, or there's fog forecast and there's a lot of holding going around, I dare say we'll be auto landing. And Virgin, we have one of the lowest minima. It's something you have to do a lot of training in the simulator and checking, and that's why you routinely might just practice it, because both the captain and first officer have special roles in that particular type of flight, and you want to be
So there's a few interesting questions that have come through. Thank you for that. If you don't feel comfortable answering this, that's also okay. But somebody wants to know what as a pilot, what's your view on these? Obviously, like something like the Malaysian Airlines appearance, and how do you sort of professionally think about these things?
It's so funny. Everyone asks you that question, and it's funny how you're like talking about how people want to hear about what a pilot has to say. It's funny. I just think, it's just my job. I've grown up, my dad's a pilot, grandfather's a pilot. I sort of that's it. But when you go somewhere, people always ask you these questions, and that's definitely a question that always comes up with the Malaysian. I actually have no idea. Like at first, you think, it was just a crash, but there's, I don't know. Like, I don't even know where to begin with that one.
With all the technology and with all the sort of like, does it make sense that something like that could happen? Just, no,
it doesn't. It doesn't make sense that happen. Like a 777 just doesn't go missing. So we have so many different things on board that are so accurate. Like I was saying earlier, it's just, but it is just a complicated process, and that's what it comes down to. And when you have an investigation, they go in with something being completely unbiased, and they find what actually happened. Yeah. And I can go and say, it was probably this or that, but there are literally so many million possibilities that could have happened. Yeah. And I still could be surprised. I was like, I didn't think that was actually even possible if it happened. But yes, I guess there could be this thing and this thing happening, and there's never really one thing that causes an accident anyway. It's just a number of things that happen to occur and won't get picked up.
Right. So that's I guess I hear what you're saying, that it's impossible to really know what happened until they've actually been able to investigate, and they have nothing to investigate at this point.
Yeah, very difficult. Like I don't know that many cases. There's been a few cases where aircraft have gone missing. So yeah, but it's
put your mind aside.
I'm not going to be. I wouldn't be surprised. I will be surprised when it happens, but yeah.
So another question, just another sort of technical. I don't know if you're able to speak about your employer. I think you said that you have some issues discussing it, but somebody wanted to know if it's possible to sort of say who you fly with. I know you might not be able to. And the next question that person asked was, is it true that Melbourne to Sydney is the second most common route in the world? Do you have any idea about that?
Well, the first thing, I work for Virgin Australia, so but obviously everything I'm saying today is my my opinion.
The company.
Yeah, I'm not speaking on behalf of the company. Yeah, so I work for them. I've worked for them for 13 years, which have been it's been a great job. I've actually really enjoyed it. Sydney, Melbourne, I think it's actually the third busiest route in terms of aircraft move or passenger movements, but maybe it's a second now. Wouldn't surprise me. It is very busy. In the peak time, we've got one aircraft going every 15 minutes. So
how many flights could you typically do on a day if you're doing, like, do you do Melbourne to Sydney much, or?
Yeah, I do a lot of Melbourne, Sydney. I like having a variety. So once upon a time when I was single, I used to like going away on trips, going to Bali or just going to Phuket or something like that. But now I like being home with my family and wife. So I try and do day trips. So if I go to work, it's a day trip. Generally, it's 3 or 4 sectors. So Sydney, Melbourne, twice.
Okay. And when you do stuff like when you were single and doing stuff to Bali and that, how exciting is it in terms of the actual lifestyle? I mean, or is it just exhausting? Do you get just used to staying in the hotels, and how glamorous is it? You know,
it was a very good time in my life. I'm glad I had that experience, but the job is a lot of fun, and you make the most of it. There's some people that just go and stay in their room, and there's some people that go out and see things and do things. And there's people in all different ages that we work with. So, but it's generally a young airline with young pilots or younger, not anymore young, but younger pilots and young cabin crew. So it was pretty social.
That's awesome. So I'm sorry, so many interesting questions coming through, man. I would never have thought of these questions, but someone wanted to know, is it true that the captain and the other pilot cannot eat the same meal? And why?
Yeah, it's true. Well, it's just they don't want us to get food poisoning. So that's basically it.
Yeah.
So we always get, there's a number of meals on board, and I always have the kosher one. No, we have.
You want to get sick? What did you not kid?
No, I actually bring my own meals. It's funny, you know. My previous where I worked prior to Virgin was Rex. I don't know if many people have heard of Rex. There's a regional airline, and there was always the same meal. Literally, I worked there for just over a year, and there was like lunch and dinner was the same meal the whole time I was there. And breakfast, I used to bring my own breakfast. I used to bring some Wheat Bix. And I remember when I started at Virgin, I was eating a crew meal, and the person training me, the training captain, I was eating it, and I ate mine, and he didn't want to eat his, and I was going to eat his as well. And he's like, I was pretty small then, and he's like, "Are you mad? Like, why are you eating this rubbish, this disgusting food?" And I was like, "What, are you serious? This is great." And he's like, "Why do you think this is so good?" And I was like, "Well, I've just had like the same thing presented to me for the last year. This is amazing." And it's also at Rex, there was just like a cold sandwich. This was actually warm. They had galleys, and we'd have hot food. And he was like, "Oh, don't ever forget where you came from. That's really good hearing. It was nice hearing that." Having said that, within 6 months, I was pretty over the food. But we've got business class now, and we have like quite nice meals on certain pairings. But yeah, we don't eat the same food. But I generally bring my own food to work now, and my first officer has 2 choices or 6 choices, because we have food for the cabin crew as well.
Right. So I guess it's just so you kind of both of you sitting sick in the toilet, I guess.
Yeah, and it actually has happened. Like, not on my flight, but there are flights where it has happened, and it's obviously that's a big investigation when that sort of thing happens.
Yeah. Now, I guess a lot of your faith is in the engineers and all that service the planes and all that. Someone's asked how involved do you get in that? Do you ask questions, or you just sort of come to the plane and do what you got to do?
Okay, so an hour before departure, I sign on to go to work, and we go to a crew room, we print out a couple of things, and we walk down to the aircraft, we look at the flight plan, and then we hop on the aircraft. So at that point, when I hop on the aircraft, I'm a captain, so I assume operational control of the aircraft. And one of the first things I look at is, we call it a tech log, and that's just a log that has information about the aircraft, when it was last. The engineers do this thing called a daily inspection, where every day they look at it and you look at certain things, and it'll have other things in there that's they have been previously written up and fixed, or things that haven't been completely fixed that have just been noted, and which is completely fine. So imagine with your car, you hop in your car and there's a light on you as you get in that doesn't go on. You know, when you open the door, that light doesn't go on.
Yeah.
So if that was an airplane and that light didn't work, the flight would be grounded. So what we have is called a dispatch deviation guide. So in the DDG, it says if something isn't working, what will allow us to go with that particular thing not working. So like things like wings, they have to be on. We can't go flying without wings, or we can't go flying without engines, or we can't go flying without the wheels. But there's little things like a light over row 13 Bravo, the light's not working on that. So it will say, in that particular case, that one can be allowed to not be working for 20 days or 15 days or 5 days, and if there's another one next to it that's not working, then there has to be fixed or something like that. It's not exactly that, but then you get, that's like a,
yeah.
So then it might be some.
Sorry.
Yeah. So in our technical log, it will have things in there, and then we can look up our dispatch deviation guide to make sure we're dispatching in accordance with that. So even like a seat, sometimes you get in a seat that won't recline. That's probably been written up that the seat wouldn't recline, but actually wouldn't stay in the upright position. So for us to depart, we can't have a seat that's sitting reclining, because that's going to stop someone from getting out of the aisle in the case of emergency. So we'll have the engineers come aboard and they'll fix it in the upright position, and that in accordance with that, that's how we're allowed to go. So that's like some simple things. It gets obviously quite complicated when you have you've got various levels of complexity with systems. We can depart with only partial operations of, say, pressurization systems, with the engine. If there's a technical engine on a car, I guess either works or doesn't, or it puts that yellow light on. For us, there's thousands of parameters that are being constantly checked, and if something becomes out of a tolerance, or maybe not out of a tolerance, but maybe there's something noteworthy that you get notified of, can you depart? Maybe you can for a particular flight, say to Sydney to Melbourne, but you may not be allowed to fly that aircraft between Sydney and Perth, because we're flying.
How do you have to look at do you know all the stuff in your head, or you got manuals that you check?
I've been seeing the same thing for 10 years, but it does change. We do have manuals. So we got in the aircraft, we look in the tech log, and we'll see even one of the screens may not be working that particular day. So we have like 6 screens in the front that give us all the information that we need, but they also we can switch them. So if one screen's not working, we can get other information put on that screen, or vice versa, or they can move all around. But there's certain screens that have to work. So it's quite complicated, and it's also like a risk analysis that has to be that's been previously worked out by Boeing and the Civil Aviation Safety Authority. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, someone's just asked Debbie's asked an interesting question. Do you have final say whether you take off or not? Is that your call as captain?
Yeah, everything as captain is the final say. So even on if the DDG, dispatch deviation guide, allows me to depart with, let's think of something ridiculous. A seat being torn.
Yeah.
There's a tear in the seat, a tear in the carpet. Absolutely very, very low risk thing, isn't it? Like a tear in row 12 has a bit of carpet's been ripped. In the DDG, it might be classed as a particular thing where it will get done in the next big check. But as long as it's not a trip hazard, you're happy to depart. Well, as a captain, the final say is with me if I'm accepting that So I can say, no, I'm not accepting that. And the company will be like, okay, fine. That's your prerogative as a captain to, they might ask why, but I've never had anyone question me if I've decided not to accept something.
Fantastic. So, wow, it's quite a big responsibility in a way that you make that final.
Well, you want that way because you've got the, yeah. But like, for instance, like we have ice protection systems. So, as we fly through clouds or we fly in temperatures below zero, that we can pick up ice in various parts of the aircraft, which is inadvisable. There might be a flight you're flying between Sydney and Melbourne. There's absolutely no clouds forecast, and you have a problem with ice protection that day. You might decide you don't want to fly it, so that's fine, and they'll give you another aircraft.
Yeah. So I want to get into COVID in a minute. Just one more question, and then there are still others that are. But just curious, when the captain makes you sit on the runway for a long time, very frustrating. How important is it, and why do you sometimes have these delays where you're just sitting and sitting and sitting?
What's the holding point? Well, no one wants to sit there to start with. It's not like we're just finishing off the movie or something. Yeah. Or making phone calls. So we're sitting there because there's probably congestion on the airway. Out of Sydney, there's a certain number of takeoff and landings that you're allowed every hour. Yeah. Weather, en route spacing. It could be any number of issues while you're sitting there. Generally, there's probably a number of aircraft ahead of you. Like out of Sydney, for instance, you'll get on one particular day, if they're doing instrument approaches, so the separation standard between aircraft is decreased, and they won't just fire you off in quick succession. You've got to wait certain standard distance of the aircraft ahead of you, and then, like I said earlier, like Sydney and Melbourne, it's like every 15 minutes is an aircraft. So as soon as things start slowing down, it's big delays. Yeah.
Nice. It's like traffic on the road. It could happen.
Exactly right. Yeah. Some days, sometimes it's a school zone, sometimes it's not.
Yeah. Okay, we'll come back to this. Some very interesting questions, but let's just go to COVID, because I think a lot of people are curious as to how it's affected, your industry as pilots, and what do you believe is going to be the future of travel?
Certainly changing things. It's an event that I guess no one really saw it coming. It's very unfortunate what's happened, I guess, for a number of reasons. Yeah. But for instance, right now, Virgin, we're operating, I believe, at like 9% of our pre-COVID schedule. I think next month we're going to bring it up to like early 20s, I believe. So that's obviously that's obviously going to happen if the borders are opening, but who knows what's happening there. Yeah, so overnight, people have gone from flying to not flying. Industry has been absolutely destroyed, hopefully not permanently, but there's been friends of mine that have lost their jobs. There's no one saw this coming. Like, it's the first time ever in aviation where there's been like a worldwide downturn so dramatically in such a long period of time.
But do you feel like, I don't know if you get any information more than, let's say, we would get, but do you get a sense of, the international flights coming at some point in December, or do you reckon it's going to be next year kind of thing?
Well, I haven't got any any secret pilot information here, but yeah, I can't see any international travel anytime soon until that's my opinion. But we can't even do domestic flying between the Sydney and Perth at the moment. Yeah. So we're never going to, it's going to take forever to get these travel bubbles operating.
Right. Yeah. Well, I guess none of us are prophets, so we'll just have to wait to see. But look, we hope that, please God, you can get back to flying as much as you'd like. I know you mentioned that before you had children, they got married, you were doing a lot more flights. Someone did ask, how is, if it would get back to regular schedule, how does it affect family man? Are you saying you try pick local routes that you can be home and stuff like that?
we have a great system at work, which is pretty works most of the time. We for bidding what we want to do. So we have a 28-day roster, and I will generally work. I generally have 12 days off in that time.
Yeah.
So the rest of the time, they try and optimize you for a certain number of hours of flying, and I try and bid for day trips. So I just go to Hobart and back, Melbourne and back. Or
Can you choose not to fly internationally if you wanted to? Like, is that?
yeah, we can bid to fly internationally and not to. I was Perth based for a couple of years, and I was doing basically just just Perth Phukets for months on end, and it was great. I'd go over there, have 4 days over there, then fly back, and my now wife, which was then my girlfriend, come on a trip. Or yeah, that was really living. That was, you get allowances as well, so they pay for your hotel, which is pretty good hotel, and then you get allowances there, and yeah. But
You just
yeah,
sort of
times have
free,
changed.
you're just free for those days, and you're there. You can do what you want.
Do that anything you want. Yeah.
Awesome. Someone's asked an interesting one. You mentioned sort of it's the captain's call. Have you ever been involved where you've had some unruly passengers or issues like that on any of the flights you've done?
Oh, like last week I had one. I back to this COVID. So what's happened with me at least? So Virgin had almost 2,000 pilots prior to COVID, and now we just had about 1,900, I think, and now we've got just over 850. So we actually lost 1,000 pilots. We've made our New Zealand based pilots redundant. Tiger's been closed. Our long haul international pilots been made redundant. So it's been really, really hard for a lot of my co-workers and friends. What was that question again?
Unruly passengers.
Oh yeah. So basically, I now they're just flying me enough to keep us current.
Yeah.
So we have currency requirements for a variety of things, and one of my currency flights, basically once every 30 days, I'm flying at the moment. I flew, and we had a passenger on board that just came on and was just abusive from the very beginning to the crew members, and someone brought it to my attention, and then they decided to get into an argument with the people they're sitting with, where it was about to become a physical. It was about to become physical, and we have Australian Federal Police at the airport. They're all on call, ready to help us out if we need them. And just a normal quiet day, just going between two ports during COVID, and someone wants to have a fight and stuff. So yeah, they end up getting offloaded. That's obviously my call, but my cabin supervisor wanted them off straight away, and I was like, yeah, sure. Like, I'm not going to argue with you. I'm not going to force someone to be on board that you're not comfortable with, and especially if they're being violent. Yeah.
Would you feel that you might have to start flying sort of shipping packages and all that?
Right. Yeah. So when I was saying earlier, you get your hours up. You start off flying single engine airplanes, instructing, or flying tourists around, and you work your way up to twin engines, and then it's quite a sought after job flying freight. You do this thing called bank runs, which I did, and then you do night freight, which I did for a year and a half. I don't really want to go back and do that, but because generally, oh look, I never say never. I'd rather be earning money than doing nothing.
Yeah.
But I really do like my current job. So if it was better paid and better conditions than what I'm on now, I'd fly some boxes around. They behave.
They don't get drunk.
They don't get drunk.
Somebody asked something which I think it's on all of our minds when we fly. We know they're very strict about these mobile phones. What do you reckon about that personally? I'm sure you have to say that it's dangerous, but is it genuinely like?
It does affect the aircraft. It does. I haven't seen it in the aircraft I'm flying now, but one other aircraft I have seen, I saw some weird indications from one of our instruments one day, and it was when I was flying night freight, and I used to have my mobile phone on the dash in the front, so I could see when I was getting messages, and it was exactly when I got a message, I saw it light up, and it did something with one of my instruments, and that was like almost 20 years ago now, but it does affect it. And even through our headphones, like when we're talking air traffic control, when you put a mobile phone near a speaker, it makes that
Yeah.
that feedback. Yeah, we get that. So, but I think the problem is with the mobile phones is when there's no signal, the phone radiates. It seeks the receiver or the tower.
Yeah.
So it puts out more energy.
And that's,
So,
you can
and
cause,
then one phone is not a problem, two phones probably not a problem. But when you've got like 180 phones doing that at the same time, that's when you're getting, you're going to start interfering with things.
yeah, and that's the problem, because everyone says it's just my phone, it's not a problem, and
Yeah,
then
yeah,
180 people saying the same thing. Exactly.
yeah.
Um, Pilots getting drug tested and alcohol tested. How is that part of the standard
Yeah,
procedure?
it happens. Just some days, you just arrive for work and they're there waiting for you, or sometimes they meet you at the aircraft, or sometimes they meet you as you get off the aircraft.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So it's I guess like any industry that's got that high level
yeah,
responsibility.
it's no problem. Like yeah, I don't think they would generally find a pilot, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Have you ever had to do any emergency landings?
Yes, I've had to do some emergency landings. Not so much with my current employer, but I've had uh, I've had like an engine failure on two different aircraft. I've had a electrical fire in the flight deck. I've had one of my systems. It was actually very funny. Okay, so when you're training to be a captain, I remember this particular training captain saying to me, he was like, when things go wrong, your crew are going to look up to you for reassurance. And even if you don't know what's happening at first, you don't want to let them know that
You're
you
nervous.
have no idea. Yeah, because then like they say like, don't run, it startles the troops. So you want to just fake it till you make it. That's basically what he said. So I was only a captain for like 5 flights, and I was flying into Hobart this day. And on the E-Jet, it's extremely electronic. It's a great aircraft. It's amazing the sort of stuff that it does. And I had a particular. We were configuring the aircraft. So does most people know what flaps are? Probably no flaps. So those things that behind the wing that come out for landing.
Yeah.
Yeah, not the things that help you turn, but just near the actual fuselage, near the actual tube, each side there's these things flaps. So they just let the aircraft, they configure the aircraft for slow speed flight, so you can do an approach and landing. So I had a problem with those, and when I selected I call it, the first officer selects it for me. When he selected a particular flap setting, everything started like going berserk in the flight deck, like bing, 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 bing. Like we have all these warnings and stuff, and everything. And we have this screen that literally displays like a computer screen, what's going wrong, and it puts it in order for you so you can quickly work it out. But there was a number of different things that were coming in that shouldn't happen, and all sorts of stuff that happening. I was only a captain for 5 days here, and I just remember just looking over at the screen and looking at my first officer. That was like, he was so white, and he was an experienced guy, but he was definitely packing it. And I just looked over and I said, I guess we're not landing off this approach then. And like that, he then relaxed, and then we troubleshooted the problem, and it was ended up being a minor issue. But yeah, do I have things that go wrong? Yeah, they happen, and they happen at the most inconvenient times at the time. Yeah.
I guess that's experience, right?
Nature of the job. Yeah, yeah.
Do you know that what was that story, the flight of the Hudson?
Oh yeah.
How, I mean, when you heard about it, I don't know if you've watched the movie. Like, is that just crazy? Like,
Well,
is that just a fluke that he was able to do that,
it
or?
can happen. Like I said, like yeah, like when you said earlier what happened with the Malaysian aircraft, like I don't know, but like who would have thought that would happen?
Yeah, yeah.
You know, like in a large aircraft like that, both engines failing at that particular point and then gliding into the river, like it's something that no one would ever thought was that possible. I mean, it's possible but really, like yeah. So
Just
unlucky.
going back to waiting on the runway. Someone just asked me to ask you why are captains seeming so reticent to say why there is a delay? I mean, I haven't found them reticent, but some people feel that they just don't communicate. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah. Look, sometimes it's obvious. So like, we've offloaded the passenger and now we have to get their bag off. So you might say that, but you may not want to like sort of embarrass the person that's being offloaded, or you have to be a little bit tactful. Like I probably would hold off till they're off the aircraft and tell everyone we're just getting their bag off. But there's things that say something's gone wrong with the aircraft, and you don't want to say, hey everyone, we just got a problem with the aircraft. We're just working out if we can go or not. You might just sit on your hands for a little bit and like if I generally run with, if you've seen it go wrong, I will tell it. I say something. But if you haven't seen it or heard it, I'll probably not tell you exactly, because it doesn't matter. It's just going to upset people. It's going to make people worried.
Yeah.
Like if we've had an engine failure on takeoff and it's had a huge fire, I probably would say that. In fact, I definitely would. But if we've had a problem, say with the pressurization system that I'm not happy with taking to our destination, I might say we've got a technical issue and returning. With the delay question, maybe it's something that if they were to be honest and say, we have a problem with our load sheet and the company can't seem to get it right, and it doesn't look really good for the company. So that happens, like sometimes you have the numbers aren't matching up. So the cabin crew will check your numbers. So we got everything is aviation's been happening for a long time now. So we're getting pretty good at it. There's always things that we can learn from it, and it's still lessons to be learned. But there's a lot of clever things that happen as a passenger you're probably not aware of. So the cabin crew get their numbers. So everyone that their boarding passes go through the machine, that comes up with a tally of passengers, and I get my numbers from a different source. And then when they come into the flight deck, they'll say this is VA 627 seating to Perth on whatever the date is, and with 175 passengers aboard. And I'll look on my load sheet, and if it doesn't say 175, I have to call someone and find out why it doesn't say 175. Yep. Generally speaking, we've had someone that has failed to board, and there's been a web check-in or something like that. There's some error, and sometimes it just takes forever to work out what it is. Sometimes you've got someone that's checked in as a child that's traveling as an infant. It can be a number of things, or the bags don't match.
You have to be consistent before you can take off.
Yeah, that's right. You want to make sure you've got the right number of people on board, because not only you need to know if you've got the right number of people, but you want to make sure they're sitting in the right spots because of weight and balance. It's the aircraft's being loaded. Make sure it's been loaded correctly. There's been times when they've given us load sheets for the wrong city, the wrong day. It all happens. So, and if the aircraft's you're setting up your computer with the information, and you want to make sure that information is good. So why are we not saying what the delay is on this particular day? It's like, well, sometimes it might be something that makes someone look bad that doesn't need to, or it's something that you hope is resolved very quickly, or honesty is the best policy though. But I can't think of that many reasons why I would not say that why we're being delayed, because it's generally, could be your fault. You might have just been late, which has happened to me. Like I've slept in a couple of times, and it happens. But generally, yeah.
Okay, so we got. I know it's 9:00, but if you wouldn't mind maybe taking two more questions.
Yeah, I've got plenty of time. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So
kids are asleep.
A couple of people asking in terms of, I know Australian pilots, and that includes you, have a very good reputation. And I don't know if you want to answer this question, but are there, we've got very strict regulations in Australia, and obviously you can hear your training was exceptional, but like, are there some airlines that you would be like a little bit worried getting on, given the industry well? And I don't know if
absolutely,
you want to,
yeah. But I'm happy naming names. Doesn't bother me. I would stay away from most Indonesian airlines. Look, hopefully I'm not out of work soon. I don't have to look for a job. But yeah, there are some airlines that are very bad. I'll say the good ones to start with. The Australian airlines, all very good. It doesn't matter if it's a low cost carrier in Australia. We still have the same. We're still accountable to the same regulator. Should have the same standards. All Australian airlines are really good. My wife and I travel Singapore sometimes. I reckon they're really good as well. Middle Eastern Airlines, they're good.
How's El Al?
I haven't traveled with him yet. I'm looking forward to when I get to travel. We just got, a couple of years ago, we got staff travel with El Al. So I'm looking forward to traveling with El Al. But yeah, very good. Absolutely. Yeah, very good. But there are some airlines like some of your low-cost carriers in Asia where I would definitely steer clear of. So
And is the US airline industry, is that good?
I feel like they're a little bit more relaxed than Australian Airlines.
Yeah.
But yeah, they still should be good.
Yeah.
But yeah, stay away from Russian airlines. I know the Chinese airlines have like a lot of Western pilots. So if you've got one of them, that's good, but they're not particularly good. Then you've got like I said, Indonesia and Malaysian, I'll stay away from. All those, Thai even. Some people are surprised about that. That's actually, I think they were close to losing their rights to fly internationally fairly recently, or maybe within a year. Yeah. So maintenance in Australia is really good. The aircraft are really good.
Yeah. So if you can fly Australian Airlines, best way to go.
Yeah, it's good for a number of reasons, but it's definitely probably one of the safest options out there. There are some things that happen with overseas airlines that are really dodgy. We in Australia, we are very regulated, not just for the aircraft maintenance, but also the pilots training, the experience level that pilots have, and the sort of flight and duty that they can do. So the rest. So you're getting someone that's, for instance, even like the Middle Eastern airlines. If we're going to say Sydney to Abu Dhabi in an Australian airline, the pilots are flight time is basically any time the airplane's in the air. But with some of the Middle Eastern airlines, they only count the time when the pilot's sitting at the controls. So there's a third of the flight, say they might be sleeping. Their legal maximum can be a third more than what is done in Australia. So they're working harder. Yeah.
Yeah, and that would include servicing the planes, and from every level of safety, I guess, would extend to that.
Yeah, yeah. Really, the experience level is a big thing in Australia. You don't get inexperienced pilots flying airliners. In overseas countries, you can get people that will pay to become first officers, and yeah, it's pretty bad. Yeah.
So 2 more quick questions. This is obviously someone clearly who's Sheldon knows is flying, but he said, how excited are you with the new and modern technology regarding design, engines, fuel efficiency, and what's your favorite, a B787 or A350?
Well, I've actually been flying Boeings now for quite a while. I really like Boeings, but this time last year I went with my wife and my one daughter to Rome, and we went in the Singapore A350, and it was one of my most favorite flying experiences of my life. It was so good, and I actually, yeah, I really liked it. And I wouldn't mind flying the A350 as a result of that. But I've always liked Boeing aircraft. Boeing aircraft look the best. The A380, I think, is a horrible looking airplane. It's very comfortable as a passenger, but and it hasn't actually performed anywhere near as well as what they marketed it to be. So I think that's why they're getting rid of them. But if I had a choice between a 787, A350, I'd actually probably go to 350.
Cool. Somebody's asked any tips for up and coming, kids who might be interested in one day being pilots. Anything they could do now to?
They can contact me either through you or through my Facebook or through my Instagram. I'm happy to help anyone. I was really fortunate to have some good guidance, and got me to where I was very quickly in my career. So I'm happy to return the favor. What would I suggest though? Well, it depends, like, where they are in life, if they're at school still or what they're studying, or just they can contact me. That's no problem.
Amazing. And if you've got a 5 or 6 year old that's keen, I guess it's still too early to have anything.
No, I think I was going away with my dad when I was that old. My daughter Elle is 2.5, and she gets super excited whenever she sees an airplane. And I said to my wife, I wanted to be a doctor. I've got some friends that are doctors, and I think that is like a really fantastic profession, especially for a female. But I said she can fall back to being a pilot, but she actually is really interested in airplanes, which I'm encouraging. I just encourage them and take them to the airport, or
Just interesting. Do you find there's a one gender more than? Are there more male pilots or female pilots that you've seen?
Oh, there's definitely more male pilots. It is like a male dominated industry, but it doesn't always have to be that way. And hopefully things will change. I've got 2 daughters, and if they want to be pilots, I hope they have every opportunity to be a pilot like I did.
Yeah.
There are certain things in place now which is encouraging to have more females in the workplace, which is great.
Yeah.
But
it just landed up being like that. It's not. Have you seen like an increase in female pilots or?
Oh, absolutely. It's probably gone from one end of the scale of having no females to now having way more females. Yeah. And my only concern is this particular profession is you want the best person in the seat. That's you don't want someone there just on the basis of filling a particular quota. Yeah. But I understand that you need to have more females in there to attract more females. And
yes.
So, yeah.
Well, I think which is very encouraging. I think most or a lot of industries now are having a lot of equality in that regard. Hopefully in the airlines as well. I mean, I volunteer as a police chaplain, and it's amazing how that whole industry is. Males and females are. I think it's pretty equal in terms of numbers at this. Right.
Yeah.
So one final question: do you ever foresee a time when people will be allowed in the cockpit again when the flights are going on?
I really hope there will be, because it's how I really got interested in it. It was my father letting me sit there and watching things happen, and it is. I would love to do that with my kids, but it was only September 11th when it started. They put the bulletproof doors and the locks and stuff on the flight deck, but it was only a couple of years after that where it actually stopped at Virgin. But there are some countries, like I've been traveling overseas, and I've just showed my ID card, and they've taken me into the flight deck, and I've sat there and had a chat to those pilots, and some of them have frightened me, in fact.
Maybe you shouldn't have gone in there.
No, this one day I was we're going between Paris, Charles de Gaulle, and I can't remember the airport in Sardinia, and there was only 2 airlines to choose, and they were both. I remember thinking, "Oh, what are we going to do? I'll choose this one." And I remember walking into the flight deck. This captain was screaming at someone on this phone. He was obviously trying to get some clearance to do something, and the first officer was like totally disconnected. He wasn't even involved in what was happening. There was manuals everywhere. We took. I fly the 737, and this was in a 737. I was just watching, I was like, what is happening here? Like, this is a farce. It was literally a farce. All the instruments weren't set up correctly, and then the captain starts doing the first officer's job on certain things. The first officer's sitting there, and they didn't follow like the Boeing procedure for anything. I sat there. I was actually quite terrified. I was thinking, like, am I going to have to say something? And anyway, I said to them after we got airborne, I said, "Oh, look, do you mind if I just go have a quick chat to my wife? And is it all right if I come in back for landing?" And I really did not want to be there at all, but I just really wanted to be that extra set of eyes to stop them from hitting the ground or something. Because I honestly, we have in the aircraft, we have this system that monitors all sorts of things, and it reports you if you do something outside. It keeps you honest, essentially. But these guys, it would have been like flagging every single thing they did. And I said to my wife, I said to Katie, I was like, "Are you okay if I just go back? I feel like I've got to be there. I'll explain to you on the other end." And she's like, "Okay." And it was one of the worst flights as a passenger in my life, just sitting there. And when one of the guys was like, "Oh yeah, I want to work for Virgin. Do you reckon you can help me get in?" And I was like, yeah, sure. Oh my God, never. They were terrible, these two. Yeah.
Very good. Well, look, Aaron, thank you so much for your time and being willing to answer all these questions. I probably missed a few questions, so I apologize if I missed anyone's question. We've given us a really fascinating insight into this industry. And it looks like, I mean, look, still most people have stayed on to hear all the questions. So it's definitely, as you said, people find it fascinating. I'm sure wherever you go, people want to know, ask you all sorts of questions about it.
It's funny, like it's something like you said earlier. The people just they say, how do you know if there's an airline pilot in the room? And they like, don't worry, he'll tell you. But it's funny, like but sometimes it comes out, and then you end up like talking about stuff, and yeah.
Amazing. Well, look, so we from South Caulfield Shul, we really just want to thank you for your time, and
No problem. Anytime.
We please God, you'll be back up in the sky with the hours that you want, and we can all start traveling again, and hopefully we'll all be safe and healthy. And for anyone watching, please join us. There's a number of events coming up over the next few weeks, so still got lots going on. So stay tuned. And again, a big yashar koach, a big thank you to Aaron. We're going to end the live stream and